draining and mind-numbing task today than scrolling through the comments sections of your local media. Radio and television stations in particular have an odious task, balancing free speech and maintaining the foundational principle upon which their very existence is owed. Intro to Mass Communication 101. Two of the many things I took away from that course. 1. Felix the cat was the first image to be broadcast on television. Sweet. It's my middle name. B. PICON. If there's anything I adore in abundance more than alliteration, it's an acronym. The FCC, or Federal Communications Commission, in the beginning, was a government agency that stood for upholding community standards, issuing and upholding licenses for broadcast entities, and holding parties accountable. Less so today, thanks to a lot of factors, namely for whom we vote. When I got into broadcasting in the mid-90s, the FCC was no longer issuing individual broadcast licenses. I know, because I tried to get one. I wanted one so badly. I wanted to frame it. I know it sounds corny, but I always wanted to hang it next to my master's degree and my ordination certificate and all the other documents I don't use. Once upon a time, everyone cracking a mic had to have a license. It meant something. Back then, not just anyone could get on the radio and just say whatever. As Jesus said in Deuteronomy, "With great power comes great responsibility." So the FCC established that broadcast entities should first and foremost serve the communities to which they are licensed. So what does that mean? The acronym PICON explains it all, a principle that dates back before the FCC, before the government, all the way back to our colonial roots, 1727, I think. PICON was embraced by the FCC as a standard for issuing the privilege and responsibility of broadcasting to the communities and the people of America. Back then, when, that sort of thing mattered. Broadcast entities should act in the public's interest, convenience, or necessity. PICON. The public's interest, the public's convenience, the public's necessity. Notice in there it says or, not and. Otherwise, the acronym would be PICON, and that'd just be nuts. The or and is something I realized early in my studies. Verbiage is deliberate, especially back then. It doesn't have to hit all three. Not and. But it must at least address one or more. Or. PICON. Public interest, convenience, or necessity. Think of it like those signs at your kid's school. The THINK acronym. Think before you speak. Is it true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, or kind? If not, why are you saying it? Really stop and consider that for a moment. Use that filter in the comments sections. Scroll through a story, any story, and filter all the comments through the THINK acronym. Most of them aren't true, helpful, inspiring, or necessary, and oh boy, are they not kind. Let's break down PICON. So the principal foundation of this is the public's interest. That would be where you get principles of ownership regulation, equal time for political opponents, emergency alert systems, etc. News, weather, community events, programming for the community. Working in the public's interest. Convenience. Well, it needs to be in the community, readily available, readily accessible. In case of emergency, we need to be able to get on a microphone and warn everyone the aliens have landed. The community should have reasonable access to their media. Correct? After all, isn't it their media? Or at least it once was supposed to be. Money, politics, bygones. Necessity. This is the most important because it lays out the very idea that broadcasting is necessary for our communities. The early forefathers of the FCC couldn't have foreseen the technology we have today, but it goes without saying that services like Apple Music, Spotify, satellite radio, they all rely on way too many channels before the message reaches its audience. Radio, you just walk in, flip the switch, and you're live before whomever's in range and has a device and tuned in that frequency. Ultimately, the internet will go down. That renders everything tech-related useless. But radio and TV waves are constant, man, and therefore a community relies on that information and entertainment. After all, Broadcast licenses weren't intended to be awarded to corporations. Licenses were intended for communities. This is why on every FCC license, there's a field for city of license. It matters. Legal IDs have to mention the city of license. So if you're in a major metro area and you hear a radio station identify as from somewhere outside there, well, you know it's probably been gobbled up by corporate radio, depriving a community of its necessary broadcast media. Some might argue, why even have an FCC at all? Why should radio and television stations be regulated by the government at all? Well, it's the same reason I can say profanities on my YouTube channel, but I can't curse on NBC. The same reason shows on cable can get away with way more than broadcast networks. One reason. Broadcasting is invasive. What does that mean? Think of it like this. While it's true with everything that you can either turn it on or turn it off, the AM/FM radio and UHF/VHF television work off frequencies and waves and science. Once you put it out there, it's out there, and every radio or television within range can hear it. Anyone near a radio or television can hear it. Anyone, even the little children's innocent ears. And now you know why you can hear Nine Inch Nails closer on a satellite radio station in its unabashed entirety, and on the FM station, it's edited. There's a big difference in paying for a subscription to a service which would be free enterprise, big business, and broadcast stations who have no way of regulating who has access to their product once they put it out. It's different. For subscriptions, the onus is passed on to the subscriber. If a child hears a dirty word, it's on you for having the subscription service on, where you know what's going in that content is different. You're not going into it, that's why you subscribe, because it's different content. For broadcast, the government has been very clear where this technology is concerned ever since it was discovered. We cannot trust people to do the right thing. So standards were put in place. Here's the thing about standards. It's like a lid on a pressure cooker in society. People evolve and grow, and needs change. And eventually those standards, whatever they are, will need to be tested. Think of it like a test in school. You take the test to show you've mastered what was on the test. Then you move on to the next hardest thing. Growth, evolution, progress pushes our boundaries. A lot of the time that progress is good, if not necessary. But at the same time, Ellen DeGeneres, Howard Stern, Rush Limbaugh. These are all instances of progress in different respects. And with that progress comes the slippery slope of societal standards. Ellen coming out as gay opened the doors for more actors to come out and more characters to be representative of that community. I hope this isn't taken wrong, and I apologize in advance if it is. But there's a direct correlation to all the LGBTQ characters in programming today, straight back to Ellen coming out on that airport microphone. That instance in media normalized something that had been shoved in a closet forever. Sure, gay was a thing that was talked about, but it was usually only alluded to without actually, saying it, or a quirky side character, a punchline, if not a slur. Ellen was front and center. It was her show, her name, and she was the star. And that star was finally ready to openly shine brightly gay. Progress. Unless you're from the other perspective, and Ellen is not to credit for that single moment in television history that launched a movement that has saved countless lives, but rather Ellen is to blame for that movement. It's Ellen's the reason everybody has to be gay on TV now. It's a perspective, toxic or not. But this was an instance where progress pushed our societal boundaries. You can argue for the better or the worse, but let's be honest, this right now, what we're experiencing, is a lot more true to our true identity as a culture and as a country than anything anybody's been used to back in the good old days. We were just living a lie just to keep everybody from freaking out. Howard Stern similarly changed radio broadcasting by busting open the doors of what was considered appropriate and acceptable on the radio. And just like with Ellen, there's two sides to it. And sure, Imus changed the game, but Stern took the ball and changed the industry. Hell, Stern created a whole new industry, I might argue. But at what cost? Stern took our standards and shattered them. Like old sitcom couples sleeping in separate beds, allowed the audience to see into a couple's bedroom without having to imagine what else was going on in there. Then someone pushed the beds together and whammo, little Ricky. Now everybody has sex right in front of us. Howard Stern did that to radio. And ultimately led to Rush Limbaugh. He took our standards of political discourse and turned it over on its ear. How to Get Away with Hate Speech should be the title of his posthumous biography. The man was a vile disgrace to the responsibility of broadcasting. He was the very antithesis of PICON. However, he was a trailblazer and changed the game. He blew our standards of what was acceptable as far as political discourse and talk radio completely out of the water. And it'll forever be different. Broadcasting is invasive. That's the reason for the standards in place. It's there whether we want it or not. Stern, Rush, they pushed and eventually grew beyond broadcast standards. And they left broadcast behind for satellite syndication. Broadcast in its earliest forms was instantaneous and gone into the ether once it was over. I did almost 2 decades of radio shows that no one will ever hear again because they were live. That's becoming less and less the case today. Today, there's not much difference between broadcast, satellite, and streaming as far as the content and programming goes. More and more programs are recordings of something said or done earlier, if even just a few moments. Without technology's aid, you can't rewind or replay live radio or television programming. However, what you put out on the internet stays forever. All the more reason to filter ourselves before hitting the comments section. So other than PICON, what standards are we talking about? Before the Telecommunications Act in the late 1990s, many radio stations were individually owned. There were some corporations buying smaller stations, but the FCC had strict rules on how dominant one particular owner could be in a given market. The reason being that if one person owned all the media, that was power. That wasn't fair and wouldn't be good for the community or the industry. Money and politics changed all of that. And you can blame both parties. They sold us all out. What happened in my former industry was the stations in the suburbs and small rural outlying counties got swallowed up by big radio. The offices, facilities closed, moved to the closest major metro area, staffs cut, services slashed, and cookie-cutter formats put into place. Sure, it sounded better than, Wilbur from the Meat and Three reading the obituaries in the morning show and then doing the swapping shop. But these communities lost their identity, their connection, their soul. Flash forward to where we are today. For example, in the city I live in, we have many radio stations, all owned by, 5 companies? 3 major corporate players and 2 smaller companies, at least one of them very, very local. We have 3 major TV network affiliates, with the Fox affiliate being operated by one of the big 3. We have a newspaper, but it's 2021, so why are we even talking about that? Now, the newspaper's social media, along with the local radio and more specifically television stations, is wide open with post after post, story after story filled with endless toxicity in the comments sections. We've all experienced it, or at least heard someone say it. In fact, the comments section has now sort of become its own cliche. It's a part of our pop culture. You've heard me talk about in previous videos about the dumbing down of our intellect and the numbing down of our compassion. Well, welcome to the comments section. The live action embodiment of the worst humanity has to offer. This is a place where anybody can be a thumb warrior. I should know. I've wallowed in the muck with the critters. And it's so hard not to engage. Look, for me, I'm an educated guy. And when I see somebody just so blatantly wrong, it drives me bonkers. Still, the comments on some of the posts can be vile, harassing, threatening, and telling of a direction our society is heading. Hell, I've been threatened just for telling a simply Googleable fact. Toxic. I heard the Dave Mason song, We Just Disagree, the other day. So we'll just leave it alone, because we don't see eye to eye. There ain't no good guy, there ain't no bad guy. There's only you and me, and we just disagree. On one side, we're where we're at today because of this mindset, not taking the hard stance against people with toxic ideals all along the way. We just disagree and we move on, pick your battles. But all silence does is enable the toxicity. There are bad guys, and those bad guys are spreading lies and conspiracies and trolling people. There are clearly some bad guys. What are we supposed to do? Just not correct their lies? The other side of that song is, we aren't changing minds here. We always hear that. And I believe that to be true on the grand scale. I know for a fact I've changed minds. I've had people over the years come to me and tell me that I helped them not make a terrible decision or said something that made them see something in a different way and sparked their perspective to go in a different light. But at what cost, man? As much as I put out there, that batting average has got to be low. Plus, what I'm saying isn't exactly kumbaya at church camp. Sidebar, when rights issues come up, often we allow ourselves to instantly take sides for fear that our freedoms or liberties might be threatened. Freedom always has a cost-benefit balance. Outside of a true utopia, one person's freedom will always infringe upon another's. So, in many of my topics, my position is freedom, yes, but at what cost? Someone needs to ask. Freedom is a slippery slope. How do we allow freedom without infringing upon somebody else's? If it's one thing we've learned about humanity, it's that it can't be trusted to do the right thing. It never has, never does. One person's freedom of speech makes another person uncomfortable. Your right to misinterpret the Second Amendment gets people killed. Freedom of religion? We've seen how that goes. People will take a good idea and human it all up. However, while I brought it up, this is a subject that really doesn't have a whole lot to do with freedom at all. Allow me to explain, since clearly 75 million people flunked a civics class. Your freedom of speech does not extend to the comments section. The media outlet deleting your comment is not censorship. We must understand what words mean if we're going to use them. We have the right to free speech, but it is not WXYZ's obligation to provide us with that soapbox, not even in the beginning. That's not how it was intended, especially if that speech is hurtful, hateful, or harmful. But our local media stations, wherever you're watching this from in America, they don't care. More comments means more engagement, means more dollars. The comments section, what purpose does it serve? To connect the community? To be a networking section? Ooh, this person liked my comment. Let's see who they are. Oh, we have so much in common. Let's add them. No, that's kind of stalkery. So we just pour verbal rocket fuel over them and light them on fire if they disagree with us. And some of these people are so nasty. You click on their profile, their information is just out there, and they're just horrible. It's no wonder more people haven't snapped in good old boy to smart mouth like me yet. Wouldn't having a social media at all be enough? Having an account where your community has accounts, posting and sharing vital stories and information. Individuals could share the story and then comment whatever they wanted on their page, right? Why do we need the comments section? It certainly isn't in the public interest. The news stories are the interest, not the comments. The comments are barely interesting. Okay, so you might get me with convenience. In fact, I might argue the comments section is the only convenience most local media has to offer. Most aren't even in their communities of license anymore. You can't just go in and request airtime. Hell, who could even afford to buy it, which is what you have to do now. And the station has the right to refuse because it's a business, not a community service. So, local media overcompensates for taking radio and television stations away from their respective communities by being really convenient for the community and being way too loosey-goosey with who says what on their social media, right? It's like the comments section the last few years is making up for a quarter century or more of stifled convenience. Like, you don't have access to us for decades? Hell, here you go, open the floodgates, comment away. Necessity. The comments section is quite possibly the most unnecessary part of media behind advertising. At least the commercials keep the lights on. They serve a purpose and sometimes they're entertaining. The comment sections are a pall on the media outlet, the network affiliate, the ownership, and the communities. While PICON clearly says or, it doesn't have to meet all three, just one or more. The comment section may pass as far as regulations go, technically, but my argument speaks to a personal responsibility. So long as we, the consumer, continue to feed that monster, so long as advertisers don't mind advertising their brands on glorified tabloid message boards, and so long as the media outlets insist on acting like glorified tabloid message boards, the venom and vitriol will continue. I argue your local media stations were awarded their license based on a primary principle of serving their communities. My claim is that by allowing the comment sections at all, these entities are violating their licenses and the public's trust. It's 2021. I know it's not the 1940s. That shouldn't matter. We need our local media to step up and do the right thing for the public interest, convenience, and necessity. What if you could just read the story and you didn't get distracted by all the absolute circus sideshow of freaks in the comment section? What if the story was the important thing and not the media outlet getting more and more engagement on their posts, regardless of what it costs? Human emotion, rage, that's more valuable to the media than money. In my podcast series, A Culture of Cultism, I look at what leads us into the sheep pens we fall into. This has something to do with that. In my upcoming Overthinking Everything episodes, I'm working on exploring methods that I've used to trick myself into being a better person and deal with stressful people and situations better. These are tricks I think will help you stay off the comment section, or at least stay more poised if you're going to venture into the swamp. Remember that filter, the THINK acronym, when you do head into those treacherous waters. Is it true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, or kind? If not, why are we saying it? And why aren't we complaining about the entities who have the ability to control it, the division in our communities, but choose not to, purely out of greed? What do you think? Are the comment sections necessary? Let me know in the comments section below. Shit. Well, what do you think? Are the comment sections of your local broadcast media outlets necessary? Post your comments below. Like, share, follow, and subscribe.